Thank you and welcome to our Livingston City Council regular meeting of December 6, 2016. Jose Ramirez, can you please lead us in Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Sicairos,
Present.
Councilmember McCabe,
Present.
Councilmember Soria,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Samra,
Present.
Mayor Espinoza.
Present. I was thinking this is my last day, but just to let you know, the new people are not going to be sworn in tonight because we didn't get the certified votes tonight back from the county. So we're going to probably continue the items. They're supposed to be, approving the canvas. So let me go through here. So the changes to agenda, council, is that for? You guys want to make a motion to continue?
Mr. Mayor, I make the motion that we continue item number 1 until December 20th meeting. I'm sorry. Okay, let me try this again. Mr. Mayor, I make the motion that we move the items number 1, 2, 3, 5.
All of them, 3, 4, 5. And
Yeah,
6.
3, 4, and 5 to the December 20th meeting.
And the 6.
Yeah, 6 and 7 to the December 20th meeting.
Okay. So 1 through 7.
Yeah, 1 through
Will be,
7 to December 20th.
Is there a second? First and second by Jim Sawyer. Second by Jim Sawyer. First by Vice Mayor Samra. Roll call, please.
Councilmember McCabe,
Present.
Councilmember Sicairos.
Yes.
Okay, that's a yes from McCabe. Councilmember Sicairos,
Yes.
Councilmember Soria,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Samra,
Yes.
Mayor Espinoza.
Yes.
Motion passes by a vote 5-0.
Supervisor John Pedro's not here, so we'll go on to city staff announcements and reports. None of staff? Okay. Got fire.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem City Council, members of the council, citizens of Livingston City. My name is Barack Cardinal, Battalion Chief with Livingston Fire Department. Just kind of go over a few things that we had within the last couple of weeks. I've been in training and on vacation for the last week, and so I just want to congratulate those that ran and that were successful, and I look forward to working with all the new council members as they come in. And Mr. Mayor, it's been a pleasure working with you. So continue
Thank you, sir.
working as you take your new position with the council, with the county board members. Okay.
Thank you.
So within the last 2 weeks, I'm going to click from November 15th to 2016 till December 6, 2016. We ran a total of 70 calls within 39 of those calls within the city, 31 within the surrounding areas of the city. Of those, 37 were medical aids, one vegetation fire. We're now entering that phase where vegetation fires are not so much of the concern. We're starting to transition more into our structural fires. So we had 13 vehicle accidents, 2 vehicle fires, 6 structure fires, and 3 alarm soundings, 1 false alarm, 3 firefighter standbys, 3 public assists, and 0 hazmat response. Next slide. Today we're at 1,410 calls, which is roughly, we're about 16% to 20% increase than we were last year at this same time. 800 of those calls, of the 1,410, 800 of those calls are within the city. 610 is within the surrounding areas of the city. 61% was with PCF response, and 16% of the 61 we had PCFs able to cover the facility for us. Within the Livingston's initial area, which kind of boundaries, Hillmar, Hillmar, Delhi, and Winton area, 78% of those calls were in that surrounding area. Next slide. And just to kind of give you an understanding of what that means is, majority of the times, there are a lot of stations that are surrounding Livingston that will respond in to assist, or we will respond out to assist them. So of those 1,400 calls that we've had, majority of them have been here within the city's response area. So we're not going out as often assisting other neighboring communities, but they're coming in assisting us. The training that we had within the last couple weeks, the paid personnel were able to attend confined space training and a multi-agency hazardous material training out in Belico. So we had other agencies from the surrounding areas. Modesto City came, Atwater City, Merced City, Merced County, and Livingston City all participated in a hazardous material training out in Belico area. And then the volunteers were able to, they had their hazmat refresher, which is done annually. So Captain Sherrick is on the Merced County hazardous material team, and he's in charge of ensuring that the annual refresher is updated annually. As we transition into our winter months, we see roughly a 36% increase in structural fires, and that's due to lack of fireplace maintenance. So our big push for the community is to ensure that they get their places inspected annually, make sure that they're not leaving once they have an ongoing fire in a fireplace, that they don't leave it unattended, and that there's always an adult supervision there maintaining that. And then our events that we had, December 2nd, our volunteers participated in the Christmas parade. And then December 3rd, our volunteers also had their annual Christmas dinner with their families. Any questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other departments? Yeah, go ahead. Can you please come to the? Yeah, because that way people at home can see you on live TV and all over the internet.
Well, to all council members, my name is Sharon Jones, and I'm from Merced County Behavior, Health, and Recovery Services, and I'm here tonight to speak about our Ending the Stigma on Mental Health campaign that is going continuous. We started in May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, and this campaign will go on. It's about ending the stigma on mental health, so that individuals who are living with the mental health or mental health problem or concern is becoming unwell will feel comfortable to come in for treatment for mental health or to get some type of support. We know that words can empower as well as disempower, and so stigma and discrimination disempowers. And so right here in this room on December 16, we're going to join and collaborate with the Livingston Police Department for an End in the Stigma campaign. And we will be giving away shirts as well as other nice goodies. And I'll do a short presentation on what stigma is about and how we can reduce stigma. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Any other departments from the city? No, but not. We'll move on to city manager announcements and reports.
Good evening, Council Mayor, Mayor and Council members. Sorry, I'm a little sick today, so apologize if my voice is not clear. I just want to make a quick announcement here that the city did apply for a SIGMAC grant for a new street sweeper. It was submitted a couple weeks back. It is going to come back to council for ratification. We do need a resolution. The total grant amount that we requested is $350,000. Again, this is for a replacement of our existing sweeper truck. We believe that we may need a new item the next couple of years, so we want to be proactive. It does require a $70,000 match, and it's coming out of the sanitation fund.
Thank you. Is that it? Okay. All right, now we'll move on to city council members' announcements. Council member McCabe.
I just want to thank everyone for coming out for the parade. It was a great event, and I want to thank staff for the great work with the decorations downtown. And big congratulations to everyone with the downtown beautification project. I've been receiving lots of compliments, and I'm very proud of the achievements that were made there.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Sicaros.
Same, I just want to congratulate staff. I mean, I've had a couple compliments on how great the parade turned out, so good job.
Okay. Councilmember Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor. I just corroborate the same thing as my colleagues. Fantastic parade, great turnout. Seemed the community enjoyed themselves, so kudos to all staff.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I'd like to do is for the December 20th meeting after the new council has been sworn in, I'd like to put on the agenda to decide what we're going to do about the vacated seat. So I'd like to put that on the agenda with the options available. We already know the options, but still, so listed that way. If we wait till that, then we have to wait till January to make that decision. To put that on the agenda, then you may not get another person seated until February, so I'd like to go ahead and do that. It kind of, I think, it gains us a month there.
Start advertising for that?
Yeah.
Okay. Going back to with the comments from the rest of the council members, I agree. Downtown is turned out beautiful, and we're just waiting on the CMAQ money from MCAG that's supposed to come from for the roundabout on B and Main Street. And I think that'll finish off that downtown rehab, and as well, I'm looking forward to looking for more grant funding to continue a little bit, probably of course on a little bit more on all the way to F Street and possibly on the north part of Main Street. That's definitely needed. We want to make sure that we have a unified community, and that the rest of the businesses in the north side feel like they're part of the downtown as well. So look forward for the future council to hopefully make that those requests, and as soon as we can get some money and fix those. So yeah, the parade was awesome, and so I was excited, and we had a lot more people than feel it than last year, so it turned out great. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to public hearings. Item number 8, introduce and waive the first reading of ordinance of the City Council of the City of Livingston repealing ordinance number 616 and replacing Livingston Municipal Code Title 4, Chapter 1, Building Administration Codes, to adopt and amend the 2016 California Building Code, 2016 California Mechanical Code, 2015 International Property Maintenance Code, 2016 California Plumbing Code, 2016 California Electrical Code, 2016 California Code of Building Conservation, 2016 Energy Code, 2016 California Green Building Standards Code, and 2016 California Residential Building Code, and all appendices attached thereto. Go ahead, Randy. Is it, I'm sorry, is it mic on or off? The lights got to be on?
It was off.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sounded fine to me. Thanks so much. So every 3 years, the state looks at its set of building codes, as the mayor has just read that long list, and talks to builders, developers, construction people, city representatives, a whole variety of folks to get input for changes. It goes through this process, and then they adopt these codes. And so we're on a 3-year cycle, and so it's required that we adopt the new cycle before the start of the new calendar year. And so that's what's before you, is the repeal of the old codes and the adoption of the new code. Now, we can do it by reference, and so that's what we're proposing to do. Now, what I have included in your packet, if you're so interested, is a listing of all the changes in the code, in our municipal code, referring to the outdated code and referring to the new code. So that's there as kind of a track changes process. Since it's an ordinance, we have to come back and you have to do a second reading and a final adoption. So when we come back, I will remove all of those track changes in the material so it'll be ready for you to adopt. I left that in simply as an aid for anyone reviewing the agenda to see exactly what's being changed. So this is really a pretty pro forma action, and we recommend that you do the introduction, waive the first reading, set the second hearing for your next meeting on the 20th, and then we proceed.
Okay.
Any questions anyone might have?
Council? No? Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and open up to the public for comments at 7:19. No comments? Okay, we'll close it back again. Council, further comments or motions?
Mr. Mayor, I don't have any comments. This is the routine thing that we have to do, at certain intervals, and it doesn't override any of our city codes anyway. So we can always make them more restrictive and more, but never under this. So that's all it holds us to. So based on that, I'd like to make the motion that we adopt the first, we introduce and waive the first reading of the ordinance number of the City Council, City of Livingston, repealing ordinance number 616 and replacing Livingston Municipal Code Title 4, Chapter 1, Building Administrative Codes to adopt and amend 2016 California Building Code, 2016 California Mechanical Code, 2015 International Property Maintenance Code, 2016 California Plumbing Code, 2016 California Electrical Code, 2016 California Code of Building Conservation, 2016 Energy Code, 2016 California Green Building Code Standard Code, and 2016 California Residential Building Code, and all appendices attached. And also like to make the motion to schedule public hearing for December 2016 for the second reading and final adoption of the ordinance.
Motion by Councilman Mayor Pro Tem Samra. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember McCabe. Roll call, please.
Councilmember McCabe,
Aye.
Councilmember Sicairos,
Yes.
Councilmember Soria, Mayor Pro Tem Samra,
Yes.
Mayor Espinoza.
Yes.
Motion passes by a vote 5-0.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to citizens' comments. This section of the agenda allows members of the public to address the city council on any item not otherwise on the agenda. Members of the public, when recognized by the mayor, should come forward to the lectern and identify themselves. Comments are normally limited to 3 minutes. In accordance with state open meeting laws, no action will be taken by the city council this evening. For items which are on the agenda this evening, members of the public will be provided an opportunity to address the city council as each item is brought up for discussion at 7:21.
Catherine Shell Rodriguez, P.O. Box 163, Livingston, and in anticipation of December 20th meeting and discussion of appointing to vacancy on the council, I would like to make a suggestion. Okay. We know that when the vote is finally certified, you'll have a first place winner, for a first place, which would be a 4-year term, a second place, which would normally be a 4-year term, and a third place, which this time around only, from what I understand, which would be a 2-year term, and then someone in 4th place, someone in 5th place, and then way down in the bottom a 6th and 7th. We also know that the person that is second place has pulled out, leaving a 4-year term, which would be a vacant 4-year term. My suggestion would be is that when we take our third place winner, and instead of appointing that person to the 2 years, going ahead and moving them up into second place to the 4-year term, and take whoever was 4th, whoever came in 4th, put them up into the 2-year term. Because from and let me understand why. First, it would seem to me unfair to appoint someone to a 4-year term who didn't even run. And secondly, the most fair thing to do, from my opinion, is whoever came in 4th place, whoever ends up in that there by the vote of the people, be pushed up. Because I think it would be very, very sad and very, very unfair for someone to be even the slightest chance of someone being appointed to a 4-year term on the council who didn't even bother to run.
Thank you for your comments.
We'll give a legal opinion to that particular comment at this point.
I know that if that was good too, but I know there's legal issues, so.
No, we'll address that on the 20th. The reality is we can't just move folks up because the office that's not being, or that's going to be vacant is actually, like you mentioned, Catherine, it's a 4-year term.
Can you talk closer to the mic, please?
But there's also a section, it's Government Code 36512, which does state how to appoint folks and how vacancies get appointed. One of the sections does state that if a vacancy occurs in the first half of the term, the office, and at least 130 days prior to the next general municipal election, that would be November 2018, the person appointed to fill the vacancy shall hold office until the next general municipal election that is scheduled 130 days or more after the date the council is notified of the vacancy. So in this case, the appointment, because it's happening, the vacancy, because it's happening right at the beginning, the appointment would only be for 2 years anyway. So in 2018, we're going to have the same situation as we did this year. We're going to have the mayor and actually 3 council members up. And after that election, everything will hopefully, without any other vacancies or anything like that, will now go to the 3-2 rotation.
But
or
again,
the 3-3 rotation.
my opinion, I don't know if it's true, but again, the council will have to vote whether the council wants to do the top 2 4-year terms and the third one a 2-year term as well, or leave it as 3-year terms for each. I mean, the 4-year terms for the top 3.
No, the options, and we'll explain that in a memo to the council in the staff report, but the reality is, just going down the council, the mayor would have the 2-year seat because it's a 2-year term. I know that there would be the first vote getter, so the person that got the most votes would be Mr. Aguilar.
I mean, but for next year,
would
next
be
time.
for 4 years, The other terms, the other two council members, they would be for 2 years. Because currently we have the third place for 2 years. The second place, because that's vacated within the first half of that term, is going to have to be for 2 years.
No, but my comment was about in 2 years, those people running for the new seats will be 4 years each one, the top three, unless the council has a resolution stating again that the for top two.
But the next one, there would be, the mayor would be for the 2 years. There would be 2 council members, which would be for 4-year seats, and there would be 1 for 2-year seats automatically because it's to finish the
Okay.
to finish the term.
Well, yeah, I just want to make sure that they didn't have to vote on it again, or
No,
so it'll just follow automatically.
And we'll explain that in there. No, it gets all complicated because we already had a term that was split into just 2 years, and now we're going to have another one at the next
Yes.
election.
Okay, good.
Ta-da.
I'm sorry, sorry, go ahead.
No problem. We got that taken care of.
Okay. Just to clarify.
Warren Ehrenberg, 1331 8th Street. Got 2 items. I've had some people come and ask me about the lighting situation on Main Street on our new, and I know it's been brought up before, I think at the last meeting, on putting in some brighter bulbs. Is that going to happen? Because they said it's kind of dark out there at night.
Yeah.
That's for one.
We'll assess that situation. We've been getting comments that the lights are brighter than the old lighting fixtures that we had, and we're hearing both sides. So I'm not sure if it is darker than it was before. We're hearing positive
It is.
feedback.
It seems darker to me, too.
We are going to be addressing the other street lights that are owned by PG&E either this week or next week. PG&E will be out here and replacing those fixtures with LED lighting as well. But yeah, we'll assess the main street. And see
Well, the lights are brighter,
Yeah.
but because they're so low, they don't put out as much light because they're a lot lower. So that's why it is darker. So
Number 2 are street signs or telephone poles. People got yard sales, and all these poles around town look like Christmas trees. And you got cardboard boxes on corners and all advertising for yard sales, and it's getting out of hand. Looks bad.
all right, thank you, sir.
That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Mike Torres, 1616 8th Street. I want to talk about that article that come out in the newspaper about electing the next council member. It said it might be a special election or appointment. This is my opinion that if you go with a special election, it's going to cost us money, which we don't have. But if you go with an appointment of appointing someone, my opinion should be the last vote getter, the high vote getter that we had in the elections the last month. Because if you go with appointing someone, if you go to appointing with someone and you have, say, 5 in the line of you might think that might be appointed, and the new council votes for him, well, that'd be 4 votes bringing in a new council member. 4 votes. Your 4 votes would bring a new council member. When the people of the people of the city went out and casted their vote for the last high vote getter, and I'm sure the last high vote getter got more than 4 votes. So you guys are going to determine with an appointment way, get a new council member with 4 votes only, instead of listening to the voice of the people of Livingston. So I recommend highly that you go back and think about it, and think about it and getting the last high vote getter from our last month's election. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good night, City Council. Good night to all the residents of Livingston. I live in Merced, but I was raised in this city of Livingston, and I have family members here, and I have a house that I own in part, here in Livingston, 1504 Willow Court.
Excuse me, sir. Please state your name for the record.
Javier Fuentes.
Thank you.
I have an idea, and this is open, of course, for you guys to consider, for the people of Livingston and the City Council especially. Yesterday, I understand that the state government of California has decided that they're going to be proposing California to be a sanctuary state for the immigrants, illegal immigrants of the state. And that means a lot. In the surface, it may seem like it's a, who doesn't want to kick out illegals? They're illegal. But if we look at it deeper, there is a lot of it. A lot of our people, our relatives, and people that are afraid of the new national government and what it's going to do to a lot of people, even citizens that were born here, sons of immigrants, and it goes to say that according to what I understand, the state is going to most likely, the majority is in favor of making the state a sanctuary state. And what I'm proposing, or what I'm asking, is that the City Council of Livingston take into consideration the possibility. It's just as a symbolic gesture. I'm sure that it may not have a bearing in the whole state, but to take into consideration to discuss and talk about the possibility of making a Livingston a sanctuary city for the immigrants, just because it's the people that are the majority of the people of Livingston, of people from immigrants, and they are people that are affected by all this fear that is in the national level and in the state of California is reacting to it. And I think it would put Livingston in a very distinguished position by having a stand on protecting the people of this city in terms of giving them support, if not legal support, but moral support in the light of the legislature in the state that is very much in favor of making this state a sanctuary state. But I just open it to discussion for you from your perspective. Thank you. Well, definitely we can bring it back as a discussion item for future councils to discuss that. So, thank you. Any other citizens' comments?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council and the public. My name is Jose Ramirez, 949 East Channel Street, representing the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission. We're in two different hats today, and then also the San Joaquin JPA Amtrak. The reason for my visit today is just to two things. One, just kind of update the council and the public a little bit about what's going on with the San Joaquin GPA, which was taken over July of this year. And so there's quite a bit of improvements that are going on, and I want to make sure that you guys are aware. One is that there was, the last time there was an actual new daily trip added to the Amtrak here in this corridor, which is between Bakersfield and Oakland, was about 14 years ago. So there's a 7th daily round trip, and there was an email that I sent over to your acting city manager, which is a survey, and anybody can participate in the survey we're trying to see what is the viability of adding an 8th daily round trip starting at mid-corridor, which would be Fresno, to Sacramento. So the survey specifically asked about whether that makes sense or not, and so your participation, whether you're an elected official or staff or general public, we would really very much appreciate your input. In addition to that, there's been several other programs and incentives going on. So, for instance, right now there is the Kids in Trains program. So, for instance, if any of the local schools or programs, or or if a group of 15 people decide to jump on the train with some kids, we can actually help you with that. And the actual cost can range between $4 and $9, which is at a very huge discount rate. And you can go anywhere along the corridor. So if you need to know more information about that, please let me know. In addition to that, there's also a lot of discounts available to seniors and in different categories, which I won't go into at this point. But there is a lot of incentives, because what we want is Amtrak. What they want is for you to get out of your car and look at jumping on the train, of course, for all of the right reasons: save our air, reduce greenhouse gases, reduce some of your stress, et cetera, et cetera. So again, any questions that you might have with regards to the Amtrak side, please let us know. I am your rep for this corridor, which extends from Merced to San Joaquin County. Switching my hat over to the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission side, congratulations to everybody in the county. The Measure V was passed with a 70%. So the mayor talked about continuing the improvements here in your Main Street. Well, this is a great time for you as a group to start looking at putting together your 5-year capital improvement plan or your expenditure plan on how you want to use those funds for street improvements, curbs and gutters, all that. All that is going to be up to you as which is the local share for your community. The ACE, which is part of the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, continues to look at extending the service all the way to Merced. Measure L in Stanislaus County passed. So, 3 minutes. Sorry. So anyways, to close comments here, if you have any questions in regards to any of these, please let me know, and thank you for the opportunity to share.
I did have a question, because I thought it was the 8th train, or the last one that I got an email, and I thought it was from Antigua to Sacramento. So that's why I never did the survey, because I thought, well, it doesn't affect me. It says for people that might be affected. So, but I didn't know if it was from Fresno to Sacramento.
Yeah. Yes. So it's a mid-corridor train, which means that it would start in Fresno and make its way.
How early, do you know?
Huh? How early?
Yeah.
Well, all that's going to be determined based on first the need, and more than likely it's going to be very early, because a lot of you are going to want to get into Sacramento very early in order to take advantage of the full day, and for business. And so this is more catered to the business, but of course it applies to non-business. So all of that is going to be taken into consideration. So please, if you haven't done it, we can either give it to you on paper, or you can do it electronically through the link that was sent out. So if there was any confusion,
if you're able to
I
send it
apologize.
to me too again, please.
Yeah.
I do that, or the rest of the council and the public. If anybody wishes to get that, and anybody at home.
Yes.
Because I'm on right now. I'm an alternate through MCAG.
That's right.
Behind Supervisor Pedroso, and I'm going to see if I could be the main one on there too, since I've been the backup. So we'll see how it goes. But that's a vote for the MCAG directors too.
Yeah. So there's the 2 top seats are vacated because Mr. Perea in Fresno was not elected, and so you guys can look at participating on the San Joaquin. It's a great board, and passenger rail service is here to stay. And there's 3 different categories that you guys are familiar with.
Those are the ones that you're going to use existing lines, and going whether you go to Manteca, Tracy, or Oakland, or Sacramento, that'd be perfect.
Yes.
In case anybody's working that in that way, and it'll keep them off the freeways.
Yeah, and lastly, if you have any suggestions on any improvements or anything, please let us know.
All right, thank you again. Any other citizens' comments? If not, we'll close citizens' comments at 7:41, and we'll move on to consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are considered routine and non-controversial, and will be enacted by one vote unless separate action is requested by the city manager or city council member. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the city council or city manager request that specific items be removed. Item number 9, approval of the warrant register dated December 1st, 2016. Council?
Mr. Mayor, I make the motion to approve the consent calendar.
Is there a second? First and second by Councilmember Soya. Roll call, please.
Councilmember McCabe?
Aye.
Councilmember Siqueiros?
Yes.
Councilmember Soria? Mayor Pro Tem Sarma?
Yes.
Mayor Espinoza?
Yes.
Consent calendar passes by a vote 5-0.
Discussion and potential action items. Item number 10. City Council accept the City of Livingston Independent Auditor's Report and Financial Statements dated June 30th, 2016, and City of Livingston Local Transportation Development Act Fund Independent Auditor's Report and Financial Statements dated June 30th, 2016.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll introduce the item, but we have Ryan Njali here to present the financial audited statements for fiscal year 2015-2016, ending on June 30th, 2016. We did have a successful audit. It is in compliance with the generally accepted accounting principles, GAP, as we call them. I believe Ryan will touch up on the highlights. I did give an update to the council a couple weeks back on regards to the financial audit.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council, for having me here tonight. If you don't mind, I have a few comments on the financial statements, then I can answer any questions you may have.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. As mentioned, this is the audit report for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2016. Once again, we issued an unqualified opinion, basically meaning that we found the city's financial records to be in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and that's the most favorable opinion that you can receive. Also, this year we did have a single audit that has to do with federal money that's received. The threshold went up this last year to $750,000. The city received some significant money for a well project through CDBG. So in this report is also some additional opinions and schedules reflecting the audit that we did on those federal funds. I'm going to just jump to page 7. This is your major funds. It's kind of your income statement for your major funds, and usually the fund that is of most interest is the general fund. You'll notice you had approximately a $570,000 increase in your overall fund balance in the general fund. So that's a good sign, and the city is keeping their expenditures within the revenues they're receiving within the general fund. We also have the major funds are kind of determined based off certain criteria, based off of assets and revenue, and so you also have 2 other major funds there, and both of those are operating as intended. Beyond that, starting on page 9 and 10, is your enterprise funds. These are also usually of interest because they operate off of user charges and are intended to sustain themselves based off those charges. You'll notice on page 11 or page 10, all the funds have an operating or have an increase in net position, and so once again the enterprise funds are operating as intended and are covering their expenses. A few other things. Last year, you might have heard that we, with a new GASB 68, the city started recognizing a liability for its pension through CalPERS. That amount, this is the second year in, and CalPERS does the actuarial study, and that number is going to continue to fluctuate. It's based off a lot of different factors, but overall, the city's pension liability is about $3.7 million. And like I said, that number fluctuates based off investment returns, life expectancy, investment returns, different things like that. So we'll continue to monitor that, but that's now on the books on page 3. You'll see on a net pension liability for that amount. There's also some significant amount of footnotes in the back that give you more information on that. Another item is your post-retirement health benefits. We've recognized $750,000 of a liability. In 2 years, they're going to also require that to be recognized in full. To this point, we've been amortizing that liability, increasing it over a 30-year period. So in another 2 years, that amount's going to be recognized in full. And on page 34, you can get an idea of what that liability amount is. It's about $3.2 million. And like I said, in June 30, 2018 audit report, that will then be recognized as well as a liability in full. Besides that, the minor funds that are in the back of the audit report, all are operating as intended. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary in any of those, so I won't spend too much time on those. As I mentioned, we did a single audit and there were no findings regarding that. And we also did a report on page 56 regarding the city's internal controls. And we didn't identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. That's also a favorable audit report. Also, we issued a management report. Basically, some general disclosures we make to the City Council. There were no exceptions to any of those comments. One new GASB that was implemented this year was GASB 72. Has to do with fair value measurement. Mainly has to do with your LAIF cash. And so there's some additional footnote disclosures with your cash footnote. Other than that, we didn't have any disagreements with management. There were no material uncorrected misstatements. And we didn't have any difficulties while performing the audit. And so once again, we'd just like to thank the staff. They do a great job in getting us what we need, and appreciate all their help in getting this done before the end of the year. So thank you, and I can answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and open it up to the public at 7:48. Any questions on this item?
Catherine Shaw Rodriguez, P.O. Box 163 again, and this is probably one more for Odie than for the auditor. If we go to page 9, statement of net position, proprietary funds, going to the column for water. So I am looking at the current assets of cash, accounts and interest receivable, due from government, due from other funds, for a total of $5,500,000 roughly. Then the note receivable of $250,000. So close to $6 million in cash equivalents, and the note receivable. Of that, approximately how much of it is the remainder from the TCP settlement that we got a few years back?
It should be just over $5 million, I believe, for water enterprise funds. Ended the fiscal year with a positive cash on hand. I believe it's under $500,000, I believe. I can confirm that and send you an email. But the majority of that should be basically TCP-related funds.
Okay.
The amount we restricted for capital improvements there, the $3.6 million, the majority was TCP funds. At the bottom, restricted for capital improvements.
Yes, I understand. I understand restricted for capital improvements of being the 3.6. But what I'm trying to get to is we received over $9 million in the settlement, and to have only 3.6 left over at this point in time, that seems a bit light. And I'm thinking that even though there's 3.6 on the restricted line, there's more of that TCP money that's up in the $3 million listed in cash and investments, the $1 million that's listed as due from other funds, and the note receivable of $250,000.
Yes, you are correct. We have been using the TCP settlement fund to upfront some of the capital improvement projects that we have. We did well 13, which is funded through a low-interest loan. That cost was upfronted by the TCP fund. We are waiting for reimbursement from the state. On well 17, which is funded through partially through a CBG grant, we are waiting for reimbursement. So all those receivables are associated with the TCP fund. So again, as of June 30th, 2016, our TCP fund balance should be just over $5 million.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public? If not, we'll bring it back to a council. Any further comments, questions on all this, or motions?
Yeah, do you have comments? Anybody want to make comments? No, Mr. Mayor, one thing I always look through when I get one of these every year is if there are any findings, or there were no findings, and there was no surprises in the audit. We knew through the budget anyway, so everything seems to be up and up, and we're good. So based on that, I'd like to make the motion that we accept the City of Livingston's independent auditor's report and financial statements dated June 30, 2016, and the City of Livingston Local Transportation Development Act independent auditor's report and financial statements dated June 30, 2016.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember McCabe. Roll call, please.
Councilmember McCabe.
Aye.
Councilmember Sicairos.
Yes.
Councilmember Soria. Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Samra.
Yes.
Mayor Espinoza.
Oh, yes, I thought Sam.
Motion passes by a vote 5-0.
Okay. Now we'll move on to item number 11, PowerPoint presentation, overview of Proposition 64 and its impact on the city by our city attorney, right? Or
Yes.
Or a top cop.
Well, we're going to we're going to team up here, right, Chief? Yes. I'll go ahead and I'll start. I did prepare a PowerPoint. So all of us have been wondering about the election in Proposition 64, and that's the Control, Regulate, and Tax Adult Use of Marijuana Act, the AUMA, which now legalizes marijuana for recreational use, and there are some limitations, or there are some restrictions on it. There's also some very important questions that the city's going to have to ask themselves, and some direction that the council, or some things that the council is going to think about for us to work on. Again, we do have a PowerPoint. Let's go to the first slide, Chief. And did you want to stand by the podium and have somebody else help us, Chief, just in case you? I know. Could you? I know. Next time we will have a clicker.
The infamous clicker. We lost it.
I know. Okay, so this presentation is intended to cover not only what the city currently has on the books. If you remember, we currently did, I think it was earlier this year, adopt ordinance related to marijuana. In that case, it was the cultivation of marijuana. Mostly we were thinking about medical, but we did address all cultivation as well. We'll go through an overview of Proposition 64, and then we'll talk a little bit about where do we go from here, the council direction on where to go. Next slide, please. So currently, what do you have in your books? Currently, your municipal code right now, the City of Livingston, does prohibit dispensaries. It also prohibits commercial cannabis uses. And those are what you think about, the dispensaries, but as we all know, the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act did bring up some of the licensing for not only dispensaries, but other types of what they call commercial activities. commercial businesses, and that could be, deliveries, manufacturing, etc. But that's currently prohibited under your code. The cultivation of marijuana and medical marijuana, both indoors and outdoors, is prohibited. That's also in the Livingston Municipal Code, except for personal medical cultivation is allowed of up to 2 plants. Remember that we had a big discussion here. We had the fire department participate, the police department, we had folks from the county, the council, the majority of the council felt as though 2 plants outdoors for medical purposes was sufficient in order to give some relief to folks that were using it for medical reasons. The code, the ordinance actually went further, had different requirements there. It had to be a detached single-family home. It gave the exact zones, and we did a lot of work as far as figuring out where are these single-family homes located. Not allowed. The city decided not to allow it in duplexes or apartment buildings, and again, there, the fire hazards, the electrical issues were a concern for the city, and it did prohibit the cultivation of marijuana within 1,000 feet from schools, childcare centers, and public parks. And of course, property owner consent was required. Next slide. And just real quick, your code does state clearly that medical marijuana dispensaries and any other commercial marijuana, also known as cannabis activities, they're all prohibited. And all cultivation of marijuana is prohibited within the city except as allowed for in that section. Just makes it very clear. And the reason for the presentation now is kind of where do we go from here? We have certain regulations, but now Proposition 64 will go in an overview and discuss kind of the impacts now. Next slide now. So the voters on November 9th did, or on November 8th, this was effective November 9th, did approve Proposition 64, which was regarding recreational cannabis. So what does that mean? That means that no longer is it tied to a medical purpose. So the law the law for a long time in California has been that cannabis is legal for medical reasons. Folks get a card, they're a patient, they're a qualified caregiver, but patients can use marijuana. We'll talk about differences between what Prop 64 does and what our current structure, the medical cannabis regulations actually provide. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end. What are the differences? We'll talk about personal use when we do the overview, personal cultivation, commercial operations, transportation and delivery, taxation, and again, like I mentioned, we'll compare it to medical cannabis statutes and local regulations allowed. Next slide, Noe. So personal use. The Proposition 64 allows folks to have up to 1 ounce to possess, transport, obtain. They could give, they could smoke it. They cannot sell it. Selling of cannabis for recreational purposes is not legal under Proposition 64 at this point. We'll talk about the commercial aspect of Proposition 64, which will start later. But as far as for personal use, as a person, I can cultivate it, I can smoke it, I can give it away, but I cannot sell it. This is individuals 21 years or older, and the idea here in Proposition 64 is it allowed folks to smoke it for recreational purposes, but it did have locational restrictions on where you can smoke it. There's a restriction that you cannot smoke it 1,000 feet away from schools, daycare, youth centers, where children are present, and that's the key. It's where children are present. There's an exception, though. If it's done in a private residence or in a business that is located within the 1,000 feet, you can still smoke it there as long as such smoking is not detectable or is not detected by others at that school or daycare or youth center. I do foresee some enforceability issues here, because what does that mean? Detecting. So there will be, I'm assuming there either will be some legislation kind of clarifying that, but we foresee there's going to be some issues with law enforcement when all of a sudden the police is called and saying, somebody at the school saying, no, I could detect it, I could smell it, and it's within 1,000 feet. So that'll be interesting how that plays out. Also, it is prohibited in public places. So not just because Proposition 64 is now allows for recreational marijuana for recreational use, doesn't mean people could be smoking marijuana up and down the street. If it's a public purpose, or if it's, I'm sorry, if it's a public place, which has been, it doesn't really provide a definition, Proposition 64, of what a public place is. But case law tells us that it's really a place out in the open. Even a private parking lot, if used by the public and open to the public, that many cases have seen that as a public place. Really what Proposition 64 is going towards is if you're actually using it in either a private residence, and even if it's a backyard, if it's fully fenced, if it's fully, there's fences there, there's questions about, well, what about in my front yard? I'm still at home, but it's a front yard. That, there's also been cases of what a public place is, and the suggestion here is, well, if you have a fence in your front yard, then yes, but if it's open to everybody, then no. That, again, I foresee litigation. I foresee some type of legislation clarifying that, because as we know, folks are they're always very protective of their private residence, and if they're in their front yard, I could imagine somebody saying, I'm in my front yard, this is my property, and I could do what I want. So we do foresee some issues of the definition of public places, since Prop 64 does not provide it. It's also prohibited where tobacco smoking is prohibited. That's important because many jurisdictions, and we'll double check Livingston's, and also that'll be something for the council to consider, have laws in place about where smoking can happen. Tobacco, and a lot of these ordinances got updated as soon as cannabis started being allowed for medical purposes, and we all knew Proposition 64 was coming. Some of these ordinances in different jurisdictions got updated to also include cannabis, but for example, smoking, even if it's just tobacco, smoking at a farmer's market, smoking out in different events has been prohibited by city ordinances in different jurisdictions. So again, Prop 64 does allow the smoking of cannabis, but it does also, there are locational restrictions on it. As I mentioned earlier, no sales. So again, for personal use, and we're talking about personal use, it doesn't allow you to actually sell it. And we'll deal with and we'll discuss what it means to actually sell, because there will be dispensaries allowed, and there will be permits. Prop 64 does provide a permit structure for commercial businesses like dispensaries, and we'll talk a little more about that in a few slides. And the cultivation for personal use, 6 plants indoors allowed per residence for personal cultivation. Actually, a city can't stop someone from growing up to 6 plants indoors. Proposition 64 allows a jurisdiction to ban all outdoor cultivation, but what you cannot ban is up to 6 plants indoors. And that's, when we think about council direction, that'll be something to start thinking about, because it doesn't allow you to stop people, but it does allow you to place reasonable regulations on the cultivation of cannabis indoors. That, for a lot of cities, has been a big issue, and we'll talk about where we could go from here, because right now there are no restrictions about how you grow cannabis indoors. Next slide. So, commercial operations. We talked a little bit about personal use. What does it mean what did Proposition 64 do for personal use? It also did a lot for commercial operations. That's something, again, that the council should think about. It provided for commercial, provided a lot, very similar to what the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act did. For medical cannabis, the law, if you remember the law that got adopted for medical cannabis, created a licensing structure. The AUMA, Proposition 64, does the same thing for recreational. It provides different categories of licenses that the state will issue that are needed in order for folks to conduct a commercial operation within a local jurisdiction, within your city. There's some nuances about dual licensing, or whether you have to show proof, things like that are different, and we're definitely looking at all of those. There's some nuances, but it really sets up, again, more permits. there will be 13 different cultivation permits or licenses from the state. Again, this is for recreational use. These will be the commercial cultivators. This is not somebody growing it in their home for personal use. The 6 plants we discussed, this is cultivating it for most likely the dispensaries, the manufacturing. This is the operations, the big commercial operations. I say big, bigger than your home, bigger than the 6 plants. Similar to the medical regulations, there are several categories of cultivation that will be allowed. And really the 13 permits, really we're talking about different sizes. We're talking about greenhouses or different sizes, different square feet, indoors, outdoors, etc. But there's going to be 13 different cultivation permits. There's going to be a permit for delivery, for distribution, manufacturing, micro businesses, which is an interesting term, which will have different licenses in one location, which will also sell, possibly cultivate. We're looking at what micro business is. We're looking for more guidance from the state. Hopefully we'll have some soon about what a micro business is. The pushing really from folks growing it to selling it. That's kind of the big push as far as kind of growing it. Kind of you hear a lot farm to fork. This you end up having to basically seed to smoke. There's going to be a license for retail. And again, the retail, you think about your dispensaries. We all know what a medical cannabis dispensary is. You have to show a card. You go in, you can buy. But it's right now, it's still technically collectives. The licensing, even for medical, haven't come out yet. They're on track to come out with the recreational permits January 1st of 2018. We think that there's a possibility. Not much, but that something will come out earlier. It doesn't prevent it from coming out earlier, but it's slated for January 1st, 2018. And we also know that many folks are actually, they've started operating. And the local law enforcement in those cities haven't stopped them. You see that a lot with medical cannabis as well, where a lot of local enforcement, a lot of local officials won't even, or police officers, the police departments will not enforce because sometimes you go through a lot of litigation with these dispensaries, with these operations, and it just sometimes folks have thought of it as it's easier not to deal with. And there's also testing. So now there will be facilities which just do the testing, which all they do is testing. For commercial operations, for the licensing, folks will be allowed to get more than one license for each one of these. So you could have possibly a retail, possibly a distribution or delivery. But for testing, you can only have one license. And I think the idea there is if you're testing it and if you're kind of grading it, let's say, the idea was make sure they're impartial. That's all they do. All they do is testing. Let's not have somebody testing and also selling it, because then I guess the idea is what prevents you from ranking your stuff pretty high? No pun intended. Next slide, please. Again, continuing commercial operation, we talked about this a little bit. State permits. They're going to be issued by the Bureau of Marijuana Control. The timing, January 2018. And they issue a priority. Actually, the AUMA, or Proposition 64, issues a priority, and it's a business and folks in good standing, and residents of California are getting a priority. So there's going to be kind of a local priority. The fear there is Colorado has been doing this. Colorado has the big operations, the big businesses. Proposition 64 kind of thought of, well, let's give priority for these licenses for folks that are in California, to stop the rushing in from other states saying, hey, we've been doing it for a while, we can do it for you really fast. It'll be interesting how that plays out. Local permits. This is what's interesting about recreational marijuana and Proposition 64. It doesn't require the commercial business to prove to the state that they have local permission, as the medical arena does, the medical laws, but it does allow cities and counties to prohibit these types of businesses. I don't know if it was just a flaw in the system as far as, or just to make it easier for the state, whereas the state says, okay, well, just come in, I'll issue you the license, and you're on your own. And if the state allows, if the city allows you, or the county allows you, you're good. If they don't allow you, you still can't operate. You still need both a license from the state and the authority, the land use authority, if you will, from a city or a county to operate one of these businesses. Next slide. So the workplace. Proposition 64, now that recreational cannabis is and pardon me, I go through cannabis or marijuana, I use the two terms. We've all used the term marijuana. Now there's a big push to use cannabis, especially with the medical cannabis, with the law, which was interesting because the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, if we all remember, it was the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act, and there was legislation then to change the word from marijuana to cannabis. So they mean the same thing, and I'm using both. But for workplace, there's no real change. Federal rules all assume marijuana is an illegal substance. You can still have, as an employer, you could have a drug-free workplace, meaning, and policies still stand, which means, the smoke break hasn't changed to a different meaning of smoke break. It's still, if it's a work-free, there's still regulations there that prohibit use at work. There's also regulations in Proposition 64, which allow cities to stop, to prohibit the use of cannabis within a city-owned business. I'm sorry, a city-owned building. Next slide, please. Some changes in transportation and delivery. For transportation, before I've seen ordinances that actually say you can't even transport cannabis through our city. You can't deliver, you can't transport it. Well, the reality is enforcement was very difficult to do for deliveries and transport. But now Proposition 64 also says you can't stop folks from passing through your city if they're going through your city to somewhere else, to another city, let's say. Let's say if you didn't allow delivery or anything like that, or any commercial uses here in the city, you still have to allow that transport through the city if they're just transporting it through. So you couldn't landlock, let's say, another jurisdiction because they couldn't pass, somebody transporting cannabis couldn't pass through your town. For deliveries, local control is still allowed, still possible. Meaning, for example, our current regulations, deliveries are not allowed. That ability to regulate delivery, to allow it or ban it, is still in Proposition 64. Next slide, please. Taxation. Here's where the state starts getting paid, right? Proposition 64 does impose a 15% excise tax on the purchases of medical and non-medical cannabis or marijuana. So now there is actually the state saying you can conduct business, you can do all these commercial businesses for cannabis. However, the state is now taxing it. So that's going to be a 15% tax. Now, the 15% tax doesn't prohibit other taxes from being imposed. So what you're going to see, and this is the concern with cannabis, this is concern from a lot of the folks that want to open up a commercial business, is that the state will do a 15% tax. There's the abilities for counties to do a tax, and then for the local jurisdiction like the city to do a tax. I know that I've actually helped jurisdictions prepare taxes on commercial uses for cannabis, which would tax the commercial cultivation and left it broad, so it covers cultivation and actual any type of sale, any type of, if money is exchanged on gross receipts, then the actual tax does apply, and leaving it blank to cover medical and non-medical cannabis. So a lot of jurisdictions right now, yes.
Does that need voter approval, or is that something where a local jurisdiction can set their own tax without seeing the voters?
Great question. That needs voter approval. So a tax like that would still be placed on the election. There was, I think, before this election, there were somewhere around 20-something jurisdictions that had a tax. This election, you saw tax measures on ballots throughout California just explode. Many jurisdictions have been waiting for Prop 64 to happen, and most of these jurisdictions, including some that I've helped, they don't allow it they don't allow cannabis, but they went ahead and put the tax just in case, and thinking they are going to allow commercial, but they wanted to get ahead and put at least put a tax on the ballot.
Are there alternative strategies between, let's say, if we did permit commercial production, are we able to impose certain fees that would be similar to a tax, or do we have to wait till we do voter approval for an actual tax to collect funds from commercial growers?
You actually would need to impose an actual, so the tax, it has to go to the voters. Fees, you could only charge reasonable fees. Now the fees for like a permit are in some jurisdictions are sky high, because they account for the use of police, for the inspections, depending on what your ordinance regulates and how you regulate it, how many inspections you require, how many audits you require, how much city involvement, how much police involvement, that permit fee goes up. But as we all know, it has to be, you have to show it's going to be a reasonable relationship, that fee, to what you're using it for. So you can't make a profit of that. I have heard of some jurisdictions negotiate with some of the businesses coming in, where the business agrees on their own to say, hey, I know you're going to do a tax. I'm willing to agree to pay you a tax, to enter into some kind of revenue sharing agreement, something like that, in order to compensate the city more.
So potentially they could do that. They could voluntarily pay a tax.
Yes.
So a tax is actually
Without having a voter approval, right?
Yes, but that would be voluntary. If you opened it up, it couldn't be kind of a requirement. You would have to kind of see the businesses coming in. But I do know of cities that were thinking about a tax, or had a tax on the ballot, or contemplated a tax, and they only allowed a few businesses to come in. Well, those businesses that were coming in were saying, well, I want to enter into an agreement with you to offer the city whatever they want to offer the city. And
it's like LA, I saw they were doing, I think it was 5% for 2 years, so it drops down to 4.5%. And
without going to the voters,
without
right?
the voters, I'm guessing it's voluntarily is
Correct. Usually that's how you end up doing it. There's ways to structure and to look at ordinances to see, can you offer some type of priority, so folks that come in that are willing to give you things get a certain priority. That's something that we've been kind of exploring, as far as, well, it's not a tax, but there are ways to possibly just cushion the let's say the hit for the city, or provide the city some more revenues while the city gets their tax in place, if the city decides to do a tax. But there's other options that can be explored.
So like at a special election, it costs us about $20,000, $30,000.
Mhm.
I'm assuming it's the same cost if we're doing a tax. Is that also something that those companies could pay for, or suggest or offer to us, say, hey, we'll pay for your ballot measure as well?
I mean, it's if they would come in and they wanted to enter into a private agreement with the city, we would be, at least the city most likely would be open to seeing at least what any city that allowed them.
But legally, that's a possibility.
That legally, I've entered into revenue sharing agreements with like card rooms, where they came into the city, they got a permit, and they wanted to provide the city more incentives. So then they enter into some kind of revenue sharing agreement. Money's money, right? So if they say, hey, we're willing to pay for this election, that's something that could be entered into some kind of agreement. With special elections, let's say if the city wanted to go to a special election, something to just consider is it would be a special tax for the special election, unless I believe you made findings for an emergency in order to do a general tax on a special election. But so some of the differences here between medical and non-medical. The state actually will have sales tax on the recreational, and there will be no sales tax on medical cannabis. So that's the break that medical cannabis gets, is just sales tax. Also mentioned cultivation tax. The actual proposition, the AUMA, has different tax rates for cultivation. So if the commercial cultivation, that is, again, we're talking about commercial taxes, this is not the personal use, not the 6 plants, but it has, the tax is $9.25 per dry weight ounce. The tax for marijuana leaves is $2.75 per dry weight ounce. So those are the two, the $9.25 per dry weight ounce, and $2.75 for the leaves. This is the tax for cultivation, and then there was the tax for the folks that are selling it, which is the 15%. So it imposes, let's see, an excise tax on purchases of marijuana and the tax on cultivation of marijuana. So they're the two taxes. The tax on purchase is 15% of gross receipts, and the tax for cultivation is the one that I just mentioned, the $9.25 per dry weight ounce, and for marijuana leaves it's $2.75. So good luck regulating it, state. A lot of times folks that are doing taxes, the local taxes, they think about cultivation and they want to do, well, let's do square feet, let's do weight's almost impossible. How do you regulate that? I'm pretty sure they're going to have a lot of different, they're looking at the track and trace, so they're looking at different mechanisms to actually track and trace the cannabis from cultivation to where it ends up, to make sure to know where cannabis is coming from. Again, that's making sure that taxes are paid throughout the process and making sure that they're not coming in from illegal sources. But yeah, good luck on making sure on all the accounting on that. And like I mentioned, local taxes, we've been talking about local taxes will also be allowed. So you have an industry here that may be taxed 15% by the state, it may be taxed then by possibly the county does a county tax, and then may be taxed by the city. So depending on how taxes go, the argument is you tax it too much. There has to be a sweet spot, because there's too much tax and people will just go underground and keep selling it like they're selling it now. So there's kind of there's a sweet spot there in taxes somewhere. We'll see where it ends up being. Exactly. Still below where tobacco, but there's not really a black market for tobacco, where cannabis, that's been probably the majority, has been in the black market. Next slide, please, Noe. Talked a little bit about local control. There's recreational versus medical marijuana. So what can the cities do? So a lot of cities are being open to the idea of cannabis now, saying Proposition 64 is now here, like it or not. It's legalized, but the cities, the local jurisdictions still have certain levels of control over cannabis. So what's the extent? So you could what are the differences? So recreational versus medical marijuana. So let's talk about extent of local control. We talked about medical. Medical, you could still ban everything. For the medical cannabis Regulation and Safety Act still allowed you and gave you the local control to be able to say no cultivation. Remember, council, you had that decision here before you as far as whether you allow some cultivation, what do you do? The council here, again, as explained earlier in the presentation, decided that 2 plants, outdoors. There were issues with indoors, electricity, things like that. That was concern. So the council did decide to allow two plants. We'll talk more about control. The taxation will be an issue that comes up, and we've talked a lot about taxation actually above. The quantity for medical, as far as what you possess, there's really no limit, right? Because the idea with medical is, even though people talked about limits, then there was a way to get around it, where is if your doctor prescribed that you needed more marijuana, more medical marijuana, then you could have more medical marijuana and also you can be under 21 years of age. It was other folks can actually use medical cannabis. You hear a lot about children using medical cannabis for seizures, things like that, for medical reasons. With the AUMA, there is a limit. It was the ounce of marijuana, or 8 grams of concentrated marijuana for the 6 a lot of people ask, well, how am I going to grow 6 plants and just get an ounce of 6 plants? We all know 6 plants is going to yield quite a bit of marijuana. The law says that you could have your ounce. Anything that's excess of that has to be locked in your your private residence or your residence has to be somewhere that can't be seen from from public view. It has to be locked. It has to be put away. A gun safe. Also the qualified patients versus 21 years, medical marijuana users, qualified patients. Now for recreational, 21 years of age or older. And future legislation, we've talked about a little bit about what we can expect to the future. I expect there to be quite a bit of future legislation just defining what some of these terms mean, what some of these regulations mean. Enforcement itself is going to be pushing for a lot of different regulations as far as how much can you enforce, where is this going, where are the laws going to help enforce Prop 64, and also just to provide more guidance to local jurisdictions.
Jose, can I speak to that real quick?
Yes.
This past May, I attended a presentation where Lori Ajax, the Bureau Chief for the California Department of Cannabis Regulation, did a presentation on this, and we've been following this. The California Police Youth Association has been following this for a while, and I actually met with her after the presentation and talked to her, and she had a big job ahead of her because it hadn't been passed yet. But basically, it was reassuring because we've got other states that have implemented recreational marijuana, and so we've got lessons learned. Colorado, one of the first states, very high incident of social issues and hospital visits and collisions involving drivers under the influence of marijuana. They looked at how they can do it better. So, following into Oregon, into Washington, and like you mentioned, the track and trace, I think they've got some pretty good models they're going to look at and being able to regulate it. Again, we're not the first state, so we're able to go back on those things that worked and didn't work. So that is reassuring, but there is, no doubt there's going to be a lot of regulation coming down the pipe, and they still have a very huge job ahead of them to implement this law.
No, that's a great point, Chief, because when I think about enforcement, also Prop 64 does say you can't drive basically under the influence. You can't smoke cannabis while you're driving, but or on a boat. Or a boat. Exactly. No, that's what it says. But think about being pulled over. That police officer, there's no breathalyzer. Let's say blood tests, cannabis just doesn't last, let's say, an hour or two while you're under the influence. It stays in your system longer.
Long time.
So those are going to be when we talk about future legislation, how is that going to be handled? How is a field sobriety test? How does an officer handle whether you're under the influence or not? Is it just going to be a test?
I think it's already measured. Can't remember what they mentioned at the new Supervisors Institute, but there's a measure already out there.
But it's just a matter of how are you going to actually implement and enforce.
Correct.
So again, a lot of future legislation on this. Next slide. Again, we talked about local regulations allowed indoor cultivation. You can ban all outdoor, but you have to allow up to 6 plants per residence. And a private residence, just to give it more definition, it is defined a house, an apartment unit, a mobile home, or other similar dwelling units. You remember when we talked about what currently Livingston has, Livingston does not allow in anything other than a detached single-family home. Well, now under Prop 64, you could have let's say an apartment building, let's say 8 units, and you're living in your apartment, and that's your residence is your apartment. It could be up to 6 plants in every single one of those apartments. The fear there is obviously, and people laugh and people think about this a little shocking, but fire's sitting here thinking, wow, this is going to be a complete fire hazard because people are going to be doing it indoors. So now you're going to get electricity that's going to be needed, all the lamps, folks that may not know what they're doing. And if you have an apartment complex, let's say 8 units, a small one, 8 units, 6 plants in each, with their lights, that could cause an issue. So that is one of the concerns and why we think Prop 64 does allow for reasonable regulations. You can't stop folks from cultivating. You can't stop them from cultivating 6 plants indoors, from growing 6 plants indoors, but you can impose reasonable regulations. What that means is not defined. Again, here we go, another possible issue of contention. But the reasonable regulations, that's going to be key. They have to be reasonable. They can't be regulations that pretty much prohibit you from, they make it so restrictive that nobody's going to be cultivating. That'll be interesting, and we'll talk about council direction. Outdoor cultivation, you can regulate or prohibit entirely. The law does allow you to say no outdoor cultivation. And for commercial uses, you may regulate or prohibit entirely. Again, the law allows you to prohibit all uses. And delivery and transportation, you may prohibit delivery but not pass-throughs like we were talking about if somebody's transporting through your jurisdiction. Quick comment regarding cultivation. There is a section that we're looking at carefully that states that if you ban all outdoor cultivation, basically, you will not be eligible for police and fire grants that are issued with this money that's collected. The state will have a priority as to where that money that they're collecting, they're doing this big tax, and the tax is supposed to be split up. The 15%, the state actually has in Proposition 64 a priority list of where this actual money's going, and a lot of it is going towards 60% for youth programs, substance abuse education, prevention and treatment, 20% for environmental cleanup and remediation, and 20% for state and local programs that reduce DUI, and grant programs designed to reduce negative health impacts resulting from marijuana legislation. There are going to be a series of grants. That's something to look at, because if you just ban it all outdoors, you may be preventing yourself from getting some of those grants. Again, as we look at where the city goes, things like that will be important to analyze of when we take the next step. Next slide, please, Noe. So, council direction. The reality is that for personal cultivation, the city will have to decide where to go with medical. Currently, the city allows 2 plants outdoors. For medical, the reality is 6 plants indoors for individual, claiming that the 6 indoors are recreational. So you can see a total of 8 plants, right? 6 indoors and 2 outdoors. Somebody says 2 outdoors are my medical. My 6 indoors are my recreational. So now we just kind of increased the ability to grow without a cleanup in our legislation here in the city of Livingston, our local ordinances. For recreational, you can't prohibit 6 plants indoors. You can adopt reasonable regulations. And for medical, commercial uses, and also non-medical commercial uses, you can prohibit. Currently, the city prohibits commercial uses for medical. I would argue that the provisions also prohibit the non-medical commercial uses, but we would be looking at those regulations for where we go. With council direction, something to think about is an option that cities have been doing is adopting a moratorium. Not so much for the commercial uses, although they throw them in there, because again, remember, commercial uses, the licensing for commercial uses, you're not really going to see it until January of 2018. You still have folks popping up here and there in the commercial. Yeah.
And I have to respectfully disagree with you on that. We're seeing it all over the state where cities and municipalities are allowing commercial entities to come in, knowing that once the state actually sets their legislation, they'll have to comply with that. They're allowing them to come in now in preparation for the 2018 harvest.
And that's actually illegal. They may be allowing folks, but the state requires a state license to operate. Without a
And Hanford as well, right?
Yep. Well.
Hanford just approved a 1 million square foot facility. Columbia just approved
Yes.
a whole entire prison to be turned into.
They're very proud of that.
So how are all of these municipalities able to do that?
There are different operations right now happening. I know through the medical, through medical like collectives and different folks that are still kind of operating through the medical laws. The state, again, Proposition 64 makes it clear you need a state license. The laws for the medical cannabis, so the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, also states that you need a state license in order to operate. I know, and the first thing that everybody tells us is they're popping up everywhere. So how do we control them? Well, the reality is, I'm assuming that these cities are saying, you're going in, we're not enforcing you, you're getting a business license, you're operating, it's up to you. It's your issue whether you have a state license or not. The state is allowed to give you fines and triple the fines, and it's very hefty fines if you're operating without a state license. You may be operating with a business license, and the cities may be saying, hey, you're good. We may be giving you all your licensing from the city that you need, but you still need a state license, but is the state enforcing or not? That may be the question.
Well, maybe they're
That's
jumping the
something to look
gun
at.
and they know that they're going to try to get the license for the state anyway, so they want to make sure that.
But the state legislation, it's clear that you need a state license, but that's exactly what we hear everywhere. They're popping up everywhere, regardless of whether, I mean, I know that I presented this to another jurisdiction where, I mean, look at LA. And LA, I know, received certain legislation for the medical, I believe in the medical cannabis. There were certain areas that were actually exempt and allowed to go early. Let me follow up on that, whether that was LA.
So they're doing it based on, so they're allowing them in on the medical side, and it's up to them later on if they're going to work with the state to be in the recreation side.
Right, and even the medical side, the permits aren't out. The reality, the permits aren't even out for the medical side. For the commercial, for the straight commercial that are not associated, that are not, you know, like a dispensary that's still a collective, still operating. The reality is, our city's really checking on as soon as the legislation happened, as soon as I could tell you, as soon as the Medical Cannabis Regulation Act happened, and now you're having the Prop 64, places are popping up everywhere.
Here's my question for us. So could we, in theory, do approvals, but say you're not allowed to actually start producing any commercial stuff until you have your state license? So you can have your permit from us, you can start building your, let's say, factory or whatever the commercial thing they're going to build, but you can't actually start the growing until you have your state licensing. Is that an option?
I don't see an issue with that. You know, we'll see where Prop 64 goes. We'll see where this goes. We are looking right now. We're currently looking at the cities that actually are allowing it, seeing if there are going to be any ramifications on this. I've also heard of a lot of folks that are medical that are just opening the door and saying, go ahead and also buy recreational.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Sacramento last Friday, and I saw facilities that were crazy. You know, 30,000 square foot facilities that are in full production right now.
The facilities in Sacramento does allow medical cannabis dispensaries, and there are, I mean, they're big shops. I mean, they move a lot of product.
Well, that's the way it has to go with medical right now, and then just they'll be ready for 2018.
Yeah, but I see that's kind of like you know, the quote unquote gray area, right? Of folks still operating and just not being shut down, you know, and just paying the taxes, doing whatever they need to do, pursuant to local legislation. But that's something we could look at, and we're looking at anyway, right now.
From our standpoint, we need 1 or 2 more firefighters. We need more police staff. And a facility that's the size of basically an acre could be bringing us $700 to $1 million in general fund money a year. So it's definitely worth us exploring these different opportunities so that people aren't going to all the other neighboring cities, and we're passing up these opportunities to really increase our public services.
Well, let's remember that when the discussion happens, when you think about commercial operation, don't just think about, and for the folks and the rest of the council, about a big acre of cultivation. Think about the smaller warehouse, the smaller industrial area warehouse that's doing manufacturing, because manufacturing, the actual production of edibles, is now where I hear where a lot of the money is. Where the extraction of oils, now that they're trying to do it safer, they have different machines. They're not using all of they're not everybody's using volatile gases, but even the ones that are have to comply with state laws regarding, like, just like an auto, like a painter would have to comply with. But those folks are pushing a lot of product in a small area, as far as like an industrial building, that they're actually producing and selling and manufacturing and paying taxes on a lot of products. So it's not just the big 1 acre cultivation anymore, right?
Yeah. I mean, so are we able to put a little bit stronger standards? So say, like, we want you to meet these standards set by the pharmaceutical industry or set by this industry. Is that something where we have that kind of oversight?
There is no limit as far as that we've seen yet, because all the standards and everything for these businesses haven't really come out. Where, yes, the local jurisdiction hypothetically could say, here are the standards. The problem with local jurisdictions sometimes putting all those restrictions or all those is that unless you're in the cannabis business, it's hard to kind of understand. So a lot of times you end up teaming up with an expert, or if you have an expert regarding that, you also end up teaming up with the fire department in order to get different regulations on different fire codes, things like that. But yes, regulations on the individualized businesses. So usually you look at the state to come out with those, and you could restrict even more. Colorado, I know, came out with a lot of different regulations specific to the actual types of businesses.
When you mentioned extraction, that's the thing that shoots off in my head. Okay, well,
things explode, right?
I'm not against anything, but I'm definitely want to make sure there's safety procedures in place to make sure they're as safe as possible.
No, and I went to a presentation that an extraction business gave to another jurisdiction, where they were showing how actually they actually did the extraction, and now it's all supposedly done, and it's all it's the extractions that folks do in their kitchen that cause the explosions that you hear about. According to this presentation, don't know how real it, how the facts or if it's true or not, but the producing it really looks like a laboratory. So when you look at them, the actual extraction facilities, they look like a lab. You couldn't tell it was something else. You go inside and it looks like lab equipment on how to do it. But yes, regulation is definitely possible. The reason I bring up council direction is because one thing that we'll ask the council is the council interested in at least having us work possibly on a moratorium, possibly coming with some regulations for the 6 indoors rather quick, the 6 indoor plants. And again, I don't know how you feel about outdoor, but having that conversation, further dialogue about having the further analysis about what you want to do with your outdoor as far as how you regulate it, but at least initially come and say, for the 6 plants that are indoors, here's some regulations. Is the council interested in that? And the reason I say that is because I think about the fire department, I think about different agencies as far as if that apartment unit, if it is growing 6 plants per unit, making sure that somebody's complying with some regulations. Is that something that the council is interested in, at least looking at samples?
What?
So the apartments, we banned apartments, but is that something we're not able to do anymore?
You're not able to do.
Correct.
Prop 64 stops the city from prohibiting any type of cultivation in a private residence, and a private residence defined as a house, an apartment unit, a mobile home, or other similar dwelling units. That's the definition.
I would encourage.
Increase the voltage, or what are the people doing?
The people are putting regulations on, whether it's where in the home, so it can't be a living quarters, so it couldn't be a bedroom. That was actually put for a bedroom. A lot of folks are saying garages. A lot of folks are now putting regulations on possibly the lighting.
I don't know if it matters a lot because people are going to do it anyway indoors. So, we have a lot of issues, on their own. But unless something explodes, then you find out that it's illegal, and the cops are going to go over there anyway. So, one comment I have is that I would encourage the council to go with the chief in either Colorado or Washington and take a tour, because I know that the supervisor, since we were approached, we got invited to Colorado, probably sometime in the future, and we'll be going over there to analyze a lot of the stuff that's going on over there. There's been how Colorado has been handling a lot of the issues, and for police services as well. I think the chief and 2 council members would, whoever the council decides, would be beneficial for the city to implement different rules or whatever you guys decide to do in the future. So, but it's a little cost, but I think that the chief and the council will be able to see, the good and the bad.
And they're doing that now.
Yeah.
I know the Hanford Council, they sent 2 representatives out there on the 11th to go review stuff. So they're set that up right now, that
I think it's
Okay.
a great idea, Mayor. I've spoken to representatives from law enforcement in both states, actually 3, Oregon, Washington, and Colorado. And it's a great idea. Go out there and learn for ourselves, lessons learned, and how we can be a safe community after its implementation.
Tony, can we get the lights, please?
Yeah, that's smell nuisance.
Question on nuisance.
Right. If you're cultivating, like, let's say outside or an apartment next door to another apartment, there's, we'll take a look at that. There wasn't really anything regarding requirements. There was the smoking aspect of it when it came to whether you're doing it in a public place or whether you're doing it near a school or a youth center, things like that. But there wasn't really and if you're bothering your neighbor or if you're affecting your neighbor for the personal use part of it, not a lot of that stuff came up in the proposition because now it's supposed to be, legal. So the cultivation of it, and I think the moving it indoors may help. I know for the apartment complexes, it's not going to help a lot because you could still smell it in apartments. Yeah, right.
It lingers. When we make a bus for a couple of plants and then we put it in the evidence, you can smell it through half the building for days. And so it's
Well, let me open up to the public, so we can have official comments over here.
Yeah,
At
if I could
8:47.
just make one quick comment. Great presentation, Jose, very comprehensive. From a public safety standpoint, just a couple of areas. I want to make sure we have a very strong educational component of the law, not only for adults but for children also. The couple of the things that from public safety standpoint, I fear is, and probably from the fire department, is fires, like you mentioned, butane, trying to get honey oil in apartments starts fires. The next thing is the DUI. That's still being regulated, and right now, I'll tell you, it's tough. When somebody's under the influence of marijuana, they drive. They're dangerous, and it's very hard to detect and prosecute those folks. And then finally, the edibles, the children. Having chocolate with marijuana in it, it's proven to be kind of a dangerous item throughout the states that have implemented it. So just a strong educational campaign for DUIs and the children. That's something I'd like to see. That would be included probably in this implementation.
Okay.
And finally, the humorous anecdote. Back in March, I traveled to India, and I was in the state of Punjab, and we're driving around. All of a sudden, I see a big crop of look like marijuana. So we pulled over, and sure enough, it's a weed over there, and they don't like it, and it's not abused. And I was just it just took me back. I was dumbfounded that all this marijuana was growing everywhere. So, anyways, thank you.
Any other citizens' comments? You got to come up to the mic, please.
Javier Fuentes again from Merced. The idea here also is to look, I think that if you have the county itself is probably going to have some kind of rules, regulations about this. And I would strongly recommend for you to take a look at what process they're following so that you're not contradicting you're against the county law, if there's going to be any law, and what their time frame is also on those rules and regulations that they're going to have, so that you're synchronized within the county. And we know about the state, but the state still has a lot of questions, a lot of ambiguities. But the county itself, what is the county going to be doing? That's the other issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Just another comment is on all these things that, like the attorney was saying, you have to think about the revenue for the city and other services and the competition that is going to be happening, and at the same time, public safety. Those are the issues that I see here that you need to really take a look at what the trade-off, because there's not going to be. I mean, if you allow it, even some cities may decide to subsidize. To subsidize the cultivation and production, because it's going to be good for their taxes tax revenue. So you have to look at those two sides, and it's going to be a hard one, but I think you can do it.
Well, just the conflict the way it was, the city allowed 2 and the county 12, and even if the city doesn't want it and the county does, or the next city over, they're going to be benefiting off it, and you're still going to get the people, plannings and indoor and outdoor in town and all the black market stuff. So that's what we have to think about. So any other comments? So I'll close the citizen comments at 8:51. Any further comments, council? Just a presentation. So.
I mean, I would like direction to. I would like to see a.
You got the mic on?
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'd like to see sample drafts on commercial production, so we can take a look at some options for that. So we're in the front of the game there. Not saying we'll vote that or not, but just saying I'd like to see samples or potentially what other jurisdictions have done to allow their commercial production to come in. Also looking at on that the fee schedules that are comparative to other jurisdictions, and if you need names of them, I can give you the ones in LA County that are doing it. Or actually, never mind. I'll email that to you later.
Would the council like to see at least sample regulations for the 6 plants indoors, at least just to consider what other folks are doing as far as placing the regulations for the 6 plants?
Yeah, and if you can look at it and see if we can make a total, so that maybe we can say, okay, 6 plants total per parcel. Is that a possibility or not?
Right. We looked at that, and the law is very, very clear that you can't prohibit up to 6 plants, because the idea was, well, if you're doing 3 plants outdoors, then you can only do 3 plants, indoors.
Right.
The law, and again, that's one of the things that I wish they changed to say up to 6 plants per parcel.
Yes.
I think that's the restriction anyway. 6 plants. Let me take a further look at that. I know that everybody was thinking, well, it's indoors, so you can't stop 6 indoors. So if you allow some outdoors, you're still stuck with the 6 indoors that you can't prohibit.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the current way folks are reading it. We're currently looking at that because where I came at it naturally was, if 6 plants is a rule, let's not regulate if you allow up to 2 plants outdoors. If you take advantage of the 2 plants outdoors, then that limits you to 4 indoors. Right. So that's kind of where I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
The law again makes it very clear that you can't prohibit 6 plants indoors, but we're looking at that to see if there's any way around.
Maybe there's a way for us to say if you have 6 indoors, then you can't have 2 outdoors, or something of that nature.
That's exactly what we're looking at.
Okay.
If you're taking advantage of the 6, then you can't do 2.
Okay.
If you decide that you only want to do 4 because you want to do 2 outside, then that's kind of how we're placing the option on you. We're not prohibiting you to do 6, but we're giving you the option to do 2. That's something that's interesting that right now we're kicking around.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. For no further comments?
The comment I might like to think, or we can regulate, is the apartment complex. I mean, if you have a 24-unit apartment complex and one blows, that's a lot of people going to be.
You can't regulate the inside stuff.
Wait till one burns down, then they'll start regulating it.
It's still 6.
I think you can.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have 24 apartment and all, let's say 24 of them are ignoring them indoor, wait till one burns down, it's going to bring all of them down.
And
then you'll start regulating it.
And the regulations there, that's a great point, because the reasonable regulations are intended to possibly regulate and make the chance of that fire less for that unit, right?
Correct.
But it's still a lot of cannabis being grown in apartments. You're right.
Okay. Thank you. All comments?
Wait till our apartment.
Thank you. And that ends our meeting. Thank you. Have a good night.